Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I am super excited to be presenting to all of you. As you know, I love to speak at conferences, and to be able to do this virtually is something that I have been dying to do for several months now, because I think this is the longest that I've gone without seeing any of you in person since 2006. So I really miss seeing all of your faces, and I wish I could see you. So if you want to turn your video on, I don't know if Eric disabled that, but I'm just fine with that if you want to do that. And I know that we have everyone on mute, and I believe there is a chat screen. I actually haven't used Zoom before for a presentation, so I'm not sure if you're able to add a chat there. It looks like you might be able to. So if you are, yep, I see the chat function there. So Tim, if you want to keep an eye on that chat for me, that would be great. And that way, for folks, as you have questions that come up, we're more than happy to, there's the chat, perfect. We're more than happy to take questions as they come up, and really want to have as much of an interactive conversation as we can virtually. So today we are going to be presenting on the highlights from our recent Innkeeper and Traveler survey. So for those of you who are familiar with our survey process, we started surveys way back in the bedandbreakfast.com days, really when the recession hit. And it was to keep a pulse on what travelers were saying, they were expecting to do for travel, and what innkeepers were seeing as far as business. And we ran that quarterly for several years. And since we acquired B&B Finder in April, we had done maybe 1 or 2 surveys in the beginning, but really hadn't done anything on a regular basis, of course, until the pandemic and COVID hit back in March. So in March, we launched our first of the new series that will be on a quarterly, if not now more, basis. And one of the great things is that we have a pretty large traveler database, and our traveler database isn't just travelers who are familiar with staying with B&Bs. Over the last year, we've really grown the traveler base to be a mix of B&B goers and all different types of lodging guests. So we have a really great mix there. And then of course our Innkeeper database as well. So after the initial survey that we launched back in March, we launched another one in May. And when we looked at the schedule of when this was going to be happening, we thought it would be really interesting to run one for the fall and see what the pulse is and what travelers are saying. So Tim and I are going to go through this presentation with you today, and I am going to make sure it looks like it is being recorded. Perfect. So I know a lot of times you have a lot of questions, so fear not, we are recording it, and we'll share that with everyone after the session. And I'm also happy to provide a copy of a PDF of the slides, so you have that to refer to as well. So just to give you a little bit of a background, so while you're looking at the results, you have an idea of how many innkeepers participated in travelers, where they're from. So we had 170 inns from mostly around the US. We did 5% were international. Average years in business around 14 years. Just like in the last several surveys, the Northeast was predominantly the largest response area. And I always like to remind innkeepers, when we send these out, I know this one was sent fairly quickly over the last week, but when we send them out, if we get a high enough concentration of responses, we are more than happy to do a specific presentation for your association, whether it's your state association, your regional, and we can hone in on those results there. And just to give folks a sense of where the respondents are in their season, of course, the majority are in their peak season now. That's up 30% from May when we took those results. So some of the results I compared from May to today, so that gives you an idea of how that may have changed for the responses from the innkeepers, with the majority of you being in your peak season now. So on the traveler side of it, 625 travelers, a lot of them, as I mentioned, newly added to the database. And demographics, I think, are important here because this actually did change from the last one. We skewed a little bit older in the demographic for these responses, but typical within the demographic of the guests who are staying at your inns. Regionally, again, the Northeast, a lot of guests from the Northeast, and then of course Southwest and so on. And the reason why that piece of it is important is because some of the statistics that we're going to be looking at are going to talk a lot about what you've probably been experiencing with a lot of the one paint getaways and focusing on how to really attract that staycation guest and traveler. So, as you know, and you've seen me present before, I drink a lot of water while I'm talking, so not much has changed there. I put this in, gosh, I think it's been 2 years now. And it's one of my favorite quotes, and I love starting with it because it's so true and it just continues to resonate. And, you know, I say a successful human is one who can lay a firm foundation with the bricks others have thrown at them. And we never expected the bricks that we had received that, you know, Acorn had done such a great job at pointing out about all the changes in Google. We certainly could have never predicted where we would be as an industry right now. So I think, you know, when we look at this and we take in this data, really thinking about how we can lay these bricks and continue to lay the bricks of the strong foundation to move forward as an industry. And a couple of things that I wanted to share before we jump into it. There's been so much incredible information. And, you know, I look at us as an industry and I've always been so proud at the level of knowledge that's shared, and certainly in times like these. This is an example from Lisa's blog about steps 1, 2, and 3 of, you know, starting with financial report, going in, preparing to reopen, marketing to the COVID world. Heather's done a great job at ALP on the marketing and sharing things out. And, you know, everyone in the industry has really come together. And, you know, it's interesting because I've worked with a lot of different PR folks along the way. And, you know, they ask me, you know, well, what are inns doing to prepare for this? You know, are they prepared for it? And I can say wholeheartedly that, you know, our industry, I feel, has been more prepared with something so unexpected than you could have ever anticipated. And that's really from the support of folks across the industry. And in one of the emails that I saw months back, I thought this is a great analogy. There was an email that came from Q4 that asked the innkeepers, are you on the beach or are you waiting for the wave? Because of course we've known since this has begun that the wave of travel was going to come back. And without a doubt, travelers were going to start traveling again. When we look at our statistics, when you look at your statistics, when you look back to March, which for some might seem, you know, light years ago, and it's amazing to watch, you know, the incremental build of travelers coming back and feeling more comfortable in traveling. And that's part of what we're going to see today in some of these results. So we're going to start with some of the results from the Innkeeper survey. And when we reached out to the innkeepers, really trying to get an idea of, you know, we know cancellations have occurred since the very beginning. There was a mass onslaught of cancellations. I had innkeepers calling me, telling me that, you know, they had to bring in staff just to answer the phone to manage cancellations over the phone. So I think one of the things that is hopeful here is in our last response, when we asked how, you know, have you received cancellations and what percentage, in May, 44% of the innkeepers who responded, which was roughly about the same number of properties to the respondents for the fall survey, 44% said that 75% or more of their bookings had canceled, and that's down now to 27. Is there something you wanted to share there, Tim?
No. I'm sorry, I was finishing breakfast, and so I shut my video off, and now I'm back.
Good for you. I was actually going to try to use one of those fancy backgrounds, but I decided to opt just for my office here at my house in Austin. So also, more properties have bookings canceling within 60 days of arrival. This is also very similar to the results that we had seen. It's a little bit higher within the first 60 days, but I think a lot of that is in part due to travelers just waiting to see, you know, where they would be. I think a lot of us anticipated, you know, ourselves included, you know, we looked at this back in, you know, March and April, and trying to forecast and understand, you know, when are travelers going to start traveling again. I think there was a feeling that it was going to start to pick up maybe in June, and then that quickly changed to July. And you'll see in some of the results that I'm sharing here, there are still some states that still have some pretty heavy restrictions on travelers coming into their states and quarantining and things like that. So, you know, some of that could be in part due to where they were traveling, whether there was, you know, weather or the unfortunate fires that are happening up in the West and in Northern California. I think there's a lot of factors that have come into that. So one question that I wish that I put in was asking travelers who did cancel some of the reasons why they did. And we've got a little bit of that background that I'm going to share with you. So when you look at the highest percentage of the travelers who canceled some of their travel plans, we asked them, you know, are you changing your plans due to COVID? And I think a couple of things here to be, you know, to be aware of, and it's interesting how this plays into some of the other statistics, is the travelers who said, yes, I've canceled all of my travel was 38%, and that was up 6% over May, and 5% over May was I've canceled some of my future plans. So certainly there are the travelers who are still, you know, they may have canceled some of them, and you'll see this when I break it down by month of when they're planning their travel. And what's really interesting is that a shift that we've seen is that travelers who were booking within that shorter booking period, a lot of them are feeling more confident to book further out. So I'd be interested to know if that's something that all of you are seeing at your properties, if you're seeing, you know, future reservations rather than last minute stays as well. So when we look at travelers who are canceling, you know, something that you see a lot, and you'll see this in the responses from the travelers, are how the innkeepers have been responding to adjusting their cancellation policies. And what's great, and I think what's been a really positive impact, and you can see this in the responses from the innkeepers when we ask them, you know, have you enforced your normal cancellation policy? Because many of us have needed to have a fairly strict cancellation policy for a lot of different reasons. So the flexibility that has been brought into this space, you can see it here, 41% no cancel is needed with a full refund, is something that we wouldn't generally see within our industry for a number of reasons. And you'll see on the traveler side that a lot of what they are responding to is that that is really important for their confidence when they are making their booking. And we've seen a lot of good ideas along the way with cancellation policies, not only with issuing a gift certificate for a future stay, so trying to retain some of that revenue, also applying a credit towards a future stay. I wanted to share some of the responses that some of the innkeepers had shared when they filled out the other part on the survey. So one innkeeper modified their cancellation policy to allow people to cancel up to 3 days prior to arrival. One changed from 2 weeks to 48 hours. So you see that 48 to 72 hour cancellation window, you know, tightening up. One property said that they do have a 24-hour cancellation rule. During April and May, there was no fee assessed. So of course, April and May being some of those, you know, bigger months where we were really trying to win back that confidence of the traveler. And another property shared that for those who booked prior to COVID, they were giving 100% credit to be used by the end of 2021. And for others, it's on a case-by-case basis, usually a credit for the remainder of the year. So I think anytime properties are able to offer that credit or extend that gift certificate or that gift card to be able to retain that business, that really has proven to be fairly successful for many properties. And it's allowed them to feel more confident about, making that cancellation window a little bit tighter, which is what you've seen across all of the travel industry. You see it every day. I get a different email from whether it's a hotel group or it's a different airline, and it's no more cancellation fees. We're waiving all fees. There's no time that, you need to cancel. If you need to change, we're completely flexible. And so this is a great example of our part of the industry really adjusting to that new norm. So when we look at if travelers are still planning to travel, this is a question that we will continue to ask, as I mentioned, on a quarterly basis. If we feel like we need to do this more often, we can absolutely do that. But when we ask travelers if they're still planning to travel, when it is once again deemed safe to travel, how likely are you to travel? So 14% said that they had already traveled this summer. That, of course, wasn't something that I had in the previous survey because it wasn't appropriate at that time to ask if you had traveled during the summer. But I put it in there because I'm actually one of those travelers. And I was just at the point where I said, I've got to get out. It was July. And I said, okay, I'm ready to go. And I'll share some of my experiences as a traveler. I've both stayed at inns, I've stayed at a hotel, and I've actually flown as well, and had great experiences across the board. And I really think that the more travelers that are getting out there and sharing those stories about their travel experiences, we're going to see that continue to rise. And it's much like, restaurants reopening in your area. Here in Austin, we are still on a shelter in place. The city extended it until December 15th. And what that means is, much like I'm sure many of you are still experiencing, bars are not open. You have to serve a certain amount of food to be able to be open. And it's been really interesting to watch restaurants adapt to that. And some restaurants that said it's too soon, we're not comfortable, that we're still doing takeout, and then others that were allowing diners in. And as these restaurants who started to let the guests come in and eat in or dine in on the patio, you can see, some of my favorite restaurants started to do that. When I first went, there were very few guests that were there, and now you have to make a reservation a day in advance because the word is getting out. They're following all the protocols. There's great reviews, and the buzz is building, and people want to get out. So we're going to talk a lot about communication and how we can really share the things that you're doing at your inn. So one thing definitely promising here is that everything that's basically to the left of that arrow. So I've already started traveling. I'm extremely likely to travel, and I'm likely, I didn't want to delay my plans, so I'm planning to travel. That's all of that across the board is up 9% from May. So again, we'll continue to see that increase as well. And one thing that I want to mention is, having these survey results and being able to compare the different results and really to be able to draw different conclusions as we look at things like ALP had in their newsletter last week had shared a recent survey by AHLA. I was looking back at some of the surveys that Lisa had put on her blog that I had seen from different bookings for direct bookings and things like that. There's just so much great data out there that we're all sharing. So when we look at the properties who responded and the innkeepers, this is extremely reassuring because when we asked, have you started to receive bookings again? Just, a few short months ago, it was 50% less than it is today. And so we're really close to that 100% mark for the properties who are open. They are receiving bookings. Guests are starting to come back, and we're starting to see how innkeepers are responding to receiving those travelers back in their properties.
Janice, I was looking at there was TripAdvisor sent out a press release today too, just talking about some of the areas that are seeing more reservations right now. And one thing that they called out in their press release was just how bed and breakfasts in particular and kind of the smaller independent lodging are seeing more people searching for reservations. They didn't say booking per se, but just more people searching for that type of lodging. Florida was kind of high on the list as far as destinations. Key Largo, I think, was #1. Key West was #2 there. But they specifically called out bed and breakfasts as being one of the more interesting forms of lodging from their data. So I thought that was pretty awesome.
Yep, that's great. And well, actually, I just saw that come in my email before we logged on. So we'll share a link to that when we share out the deck as well. And I think that's such a great point because I feel, for a number of reasons, now is really our time. Tim and I have been in this industry. I stopped counting. I don't know how many years. It's been a long time. And, I never thought before I got into this industry, I was 1 or 2 years and I felt like I'd done everything in a company. And this industry got me. Innkeepers got me. The whole idea of helping, small businesses. And, I've been waiting for that pivotal moment where it really feels like, our stage and our foundation is finally bringing us up to where people are starting to hear all the things that we've been saying over the years. And to see something like that where, TripAdvisor releases, an article and says, bed and breakfasts are the choice of travelers right now. We're seeing that across the board. And it is a time for us to continue to share that message. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So when we asked innkeepers, what months are your guests booking? So how this compares to what we saw in May, we are seeing more of the reservations coming in during November and December. It was actually a fairly low percentage in the May survey results. So again, that's, the confidence of the traveler as we get closer to those months and feeling comfortable booking that much further in advance. I think another one that is really hopeful is that past March of 2021 and looking that far out onto their calendars. And, I don't have a crystal ball, none of us do, but, thinking about what spring of 2021 is going to look like, I feel it's going to be complete gangbusters because people, a lot of people missed out on that spring travel that they would normally have and the summer travel. So, as this continues to grow, and I also think that during the winter, people are going to want to get out. And I don't know if they've announced anything in Colorado yet. I know there's a lot of talk around ski resorts and when they're going to start opening. I know Colorado just had some snow even in Denver. So that's definitely getting people excited.
Yep,
So that
pool,
could be some of that as
we were in
well.
the pool on Monday and snow yesterday. Pretty awesome.
So I'm hoping they open the ski resorts.
But yeah, Vail Resorts, they did announce their plan. They're going on a reservation type system. So you'll have to book reservations to be on the mountain skiing. Masks are going to be required on the mountain in any of the buildings on the mountains. And so, yeah, but they've also, they gave people credits from last year if they didn't use their pass. So I think, they're bending quite a bit to try to accommodate travelers because, we'll see how the winter goes without maybe some of the international guests that they experience. But yeah, I think they're gearing up to go. So that's exciting.
That's awesome. I can't wait to ski. I missed it. So if you are in those ski destinations, start thinking about packages that you can put together and how you're going to communicate what's happening at your local mountains. Because, just like all of the differences from every state that we've all experienced over the last several months and the phased reopening, I think that's part of the challenge just across the board as a travel industry that we've had is for travelers to understand what the different rules are per state for traveling and things like that. So communication really is key. And when we asked travelers when you were going to book your next vacation, when we sent out the May survey, travelers clearly were ready. They said they were going to start in June. What we've seen in this most recent result is, again, just like Innkeepers receiving reservations for November, December, and after March of 2021, that's up 15% and up 18% from travelers who said that's when they're planning their next travel. So that aligns, fairly perfectly from what Innkeepers are saying that they're seeing on their bookings. So I think another thing to think about too, and this is something when I was at the Round Barn, we thought a lot about when I ran the Inn at the Round Barn up in Waitsfield, Vermont, because, of course, back then we had 5 seasons and we thought, that was the most challenging thing we were dealing with, was having, mud season after the snow melted and stick season after, the leaves fell before the snow came. And, we had to get really creative around those 2 extra seasons that we had where we were. So when you're looking at these months where your occupancy is a little bit lower, getting creative about the packaging that you're putting together. We're going to share some of the feedback that some of the innkeepers who responded to the survey had, and really just looking at how you can try and increase that occupancy and engage those guests into coming during those months. So when we ask travelers, when do you plan to book your next vacation, and when is it, and why are some reasons why you're not? So one, again, already traveled and planning within 30 to 60 days. So I think that's interesting, because that is that time period that we saw that innkeepers were having a fair amount of cancellations. So within 30 to 60 days, we specifically phrased this question this way because there are definitely a lot of travelers who are looking for deals and discounts and packages. And as an industry, we've talked about this for years, and we are in such a strong position to have value-added packages and to share everything that's included in the price of staying at a B&B or inn. And again, that was the highest response percentage, and there was no change from May to the fall survey. So still looking to book within that, but looking to find some kind of a hook and a reason to book. So we'll look at some of the ideas that some of the innkeepers had shared on how they're doing that. And of course, there's always going to be a percentage who are waiting for more guidelines. That's going to take just more time as travelers get more comfortable. And looking but not ready to book, that actually went down from the May survey. So for future bookings, and we asked this of innkeepers, of where they're seeing their guests traveling from. And without a doubt, this is something we're seeing across the board. One-tank getaways within 150 miles. This has become so incredibly popular, number one, because of gas prices, but also because of the fact that there are, a subset of travelers who just aren't ready to fly yet, and they feel more comfortable driving. And so when you're thinking of your marketing and you're thinking of how you're targeting your guests, if you have the ability, and I'm sure any of the web consultants and web designers that you work with can share with you some of the ability of how you can retarget to travelers that are within your area and your destination, and really try and capture and focus on that one-tank getaway with some special offers and things like that. We definitely have looked at shifting gears and focusing on highlighting one-tank getaways. You'll see this, this is just a blog that we had done in August, but you'll see this across a lot of the VRBOs of the world, the OTAs. Everyone is talking about staycations and stay local, and really getting to get familiar with parts, with destinations that are close to you. This is something, growing up in New England, I've lived in Texas since 2003. And I'll tell you, over the last several months, pretty much every weekend, we take a different drive to different parts of Texas that I've never been, to small little towns. to go and discover what's around me, because one, I've never been home this long to go and do that. But two, there's just so much out there that I wasn't even aware of. So we are definitely seeing this across the board. And any kind of ideas that any of you have that you'd like to share, we'll send this out post. I would love to hear more about what you're doing to attract that one tank getaway traveler.
I would add too, there was an article I saw yesterday too, it was talking about the whole one tank getaways and the staycations and how that's kind of the thing right now, as people aren't traveling internationally or further, that kind of thing. But there was one, I guess, specific person in the article who was talking about how they stayed at a property that was just 13 miles from their house. So not even that far. They were just, wanting to get out and experience something different in their own town. And so I thought that was kind of a neat little, approach, because I think we kind of think about this as, folks coming from a little bit further than just 13 miles away. But in that particular example, I thought, boy, how awesome is that? Someone just 13 miles away coming to stay to experience something different, get out of the house for a night. Maybe they've got kids or whatever, but I thought that was pretty cool too.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up for a couple of reasons. One, my very first travel experience where I went and stayed at a property down in San Antonio, I actually chose it because they have my favorite bathtubs. It's important to me when I travel. And what was so interesting is we were out talking to some guests when we had gotten there, and they did such a great job at communicating before we had gotten there. Masks worn by all staff in public areas, and everyone now is pretty much accustomed to not only being a guest at a lodging property, but always having your mask with you, whether you're going into a store. So having guests wear masks in common areas was fine. But we were talking to this gentleman, and he said, "Oh, where are you from?" And we said, "Oh, we just live up in Austin. We just came down for the night to celebrate my birthday." And he's like, "Oh, really?" And it's like, "Oh, where are you from?" And he's like, "Oh, I live in San Antonio." So he did the exact same thing. He lives in San Antonio. He's like, "Yeah, I live 2 blocks away, but I just wanted to get away. So here I am." And then what I thought was even more interesting is he shared that his friends from San Antonio were up at the Fairmount in Austin for the weekend just to get away. So we're seeing this all over, and there I was living the statistics that, I'm reading about every day. So in all of this, I saw this quote last night and I thought, this is great. The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place, right? So, we think we've communicated something really well, but have we? What is it that the traveler might be missing or that they're still looking for? So a couple of the questions that we inserted into this survey were really to dial in and ask the travelers what they're looking for when they're making a lodging decision. So we asked travelers for future stays, where are you more likely to book your stay? I didn't put in the increase in here, but inns and B&Bs, I think we were at like 50%. We were actually lower than hotels, just nominally in May. And now, without question, as Tim mentioned in the TripAdvisor article, we're seeing inns and B&Bs, vacation rentals, and hotels. I think, we could have put in boutique hotels or the size of the property might have been a little more interesting. But by far and wide, travelers are looking for the whole stay safe, stay small, stay in.
One thing to point out too on that, Janice, it's just that a lot of the survey respondents are the travelers who subscribe to our newsletters too. So they're, already, I would say, interested in B&B. So there might be some skewing on that, just to call that out.
I have a little something to share though. I actually, on purpose, didn't send this survey out to our traveler database.
Oh.
I only shared it through our social media channels. And part of the reason why I did that is, and that's why I mentioned, these are new travelers to our database, because I actually went and I boosted the posts. So, and when you boost a post on Facebook or Instagram, you can be really specific about the target audience. And I purposely kept it fairly broad and kept it between 18 to 69 years old. And I think that maybe was only one of the filters that I put on there, because that always happens when we send a survey. Inevitably, the results are skewed more towards Inns and B&Bs. But when I saw this come back and knew that I didn't send it to the traveler
Oh, that's
database,
awesome.
I thought that makes me feel a lot more confident. And it really answers to what TripAdvisor was saying this morning in their article. So what's most important when booking lodging? And this falls right in line with the survey results that ALP shared in their newsletter last week. Number one, regularly sanitize public areas. Face masks required for staff, sanitize linens. Sanitized linens is one of those things where I think we think like, is that a joke? Like, of course our linens are sanitized. But again, it's one of those things that, you know, making sure you're communicating. We know it's important to guests and making sure that it's out there in your materials. Face masks required for guests in public places. Contactless check-in and check-out that, you know, not only comes with properties that have private entrances. There are other properties who have also come up with systems where they leave the check-in for the guests, much like we did after hours. If our innkeeper wasn't available and we left that for the guests, there are ways that you can do that even if you don't have private entrances. That one that got cut off there, the 47%, is regular temperature checks for staff. And that also falls in line with, I've seen this in a lot of copy from inns where you talk about that, you know, you make sure that, you know, your staff is healthy, no signs of COVID. That falls in line with that there. Hand sanitizer available. I want you to remember that hand sanitizer available, 38%. Limited occupancy. That was a big one for me when I was looking for a place to stay. That was the first question I asked, you know, what's your occupancy? And they said that particular property that I stayed at could only be at 50% of their occupancy. And when I had booked, they were only at 35% of that 50%. So I thought, wow, I'm going to have the entire place to myself. And it did book up to that 50% when we got there, but still, I think that's one of the things that guests really don't conceptualize. Like we do, because we understand what occupancy means and the size of a property and what that means as far as space. But really, they have more room than ever that they would, you know, be able to have at a property. And also that 24-hour minimum between guests for cleaning purposes. This is something we saw more trending towards the short-term rentals, but it's certainly applicable for inns and B&Bs, because again, that guest perception and understanding what the difference is between a vacation rental and a B&B, and, you know, having that in there also builds confidence. Not as important as the others, but as important. So we asked the innkeepers, if you're busy right now, despite COVID, what do you attribute the reason to be? And, you know, we're in a remote location. That's a given, right? A lot of properties who, you know, are further out, you're in the mountains, you have, you know, more space for guests to go out and hike and be in nature, properties that have private entrances. But that 80% communicated COVID safety measures, it is so true, because we see it in the way that travelers are booking. And when I've seen the way that innkeepers have gone in and updated the content on their sites, when I was talking to a writer from Texas Lifestyle Magazine, and we were talking about a month ago, and she was asking about some properties that she could go out and visit and wanted to experience how they were reacting to COVID and some of the things they had implemented. When I showed her the websites of the properties that I was referring her to, she was like, wow, I can't believe this. I never would have expected that a smaller lodging property would be this prepared. And, you know, that is definitely something that, you know, we have to get out on as many channels as possible. So when we asked innkeepers, what are you providing for guests? That hand sanitizer, 93% have hand sanitizer, which is awesome. And when you look at guests, I think it's just expected. I think they say 38% because it's like, well, of course, you'd have hand sanitizer, I'm going to bring it, but still important to have out there when you're providing it. And really everything else that inns have said that they're providing have fallen fairly close in line with what's important with what travelers are looking for. The one piece there at the bottom, the in-room climate controls, that was actually on the traveler survey. It just ranked lower than the other ones that I had shared with you. I'll share the full report so you can see the percentage. But also, you know, in-room breakfast is something that is important in different breakfast types. So this is an example of a property, 1825 in, and you've seen this across countless websites. And from pretty much as soon as this hit and all of the web designers, you know, took action, these COVID updates I've seen on almost every single website that I've gone to. There are a few that I haven't seen it. Maybe it's, you know, just copy that's on their homepage. But for the most part, a lot of properties have the pop-up that then links to another page that has all of the information, because it's impossible to communicate everything that you're doing in just, you know, one small spot on your website. So whether it's on B&B Finder, whether it's on TripAdvisor, anywhere that you can have a link to your website. This is something new that we just launched last week. We took our time with it because we knew that, you know, a lot of places were, you know, from what we've heard from Innkeepers, you know, we have so much coming at us, and we now have a way that properties can put a link. This is another link to your website that links right out to that COVID page, because if we know that's what travelers are looking for, they want to go to your website, they want to read specifically what you're doing at your inn, and you can add that link, as well as safety features. Going in, selecting the safety features that that you have at your property, and then we filter those out to the guests. This is an example for those of you who have a TripAdvisor listing. I don't know, and someone on the call might know, if this is only for properties who have their business listing. I don't believe it is. I think it's for anyone who has a TripAdvisor listing, but they have the ability for travelers to search for properties who are taking the safety measures, and then they list out all the safety measures that the properties select on the back end of it. So, you know, if you haven't taken the time already to go out, you know, not just focusing on your own website, but focusing on anywhere that you have the ability to share these safety measures that you are upholding at your property, definitely make sure you take the time to go in and fill that out. If there isn't a space for you to go in and get more specific with more copy, you can use, you know, your property description on different sites and have the ability to give a little bit more information there as well. So when we sent out the survey and we asked properties, you know, what are some of the things that you're doing on your own website to help share some of this information, and what are you doing to update your website and to increase that communication? So Beachwood Inn, and I put this in, I haven't done this before, but I think it's important because whenever I share examples, I always get that like, yeah, that's great. I bet they're, you know, this huge property that has, you know, 30 rooms and a huge staff, and, you know, they, you know, maybe they're new in the industry. Beachwood Inn has run the inn for 20 years, and they shared back that they're offering new recipes, which is great. I went and looked through their website. They've got a lot of great new content with recipes. And right now, I think this is also a great opportunity for us to capture more of the travelers, because I know myself and probably everybody on this call has cooked more in their life. Well, no, not all innkeepers, but certainly multiple meals a day. You always cook breakfast, but maybe now you're cooking all 3 meals and you didn't have time for lunch before, whatever it might be. And all of the recipes that are out there, you know, I'm literally reading recipe books now in the evenings, which is something I would have never done before. And also going in and taking the time to make sure you're updating your seasonal photos. If we know that travelers are booking for winter, making sure you're going in, you're getting those photos in there, and you're talking about what's happening in your area in the winter. And again, taking the time to update your photos across the board. If you're updating them on your website, update them on every listing that you have. This is an article that I just got last week that I thought was great. It's more geared towards boutique hotels, but I think it definitely has a place for us. And I would love to, I'm gonna talk to Chris and talk to some of the other state association presidents and see if we can come up with, I would love to have a panel of photographers in our industry talk about, I know they've been out on shoots, talk about how they're taking photos that really are instilling the confidence in your brand and what you're doing to adjust to the new normal. And so, you know, in this image, you can clearly see that the tables are set, they're socially distanced. Some are set just for 2, the other is set for a group of 4. And, you know, really just getting across that message of what you're doing to answer to this new normal. So if your marketing hasn't changed, which we asked a lot of properties, you know, some said, you know, we haven't changed anything with our marketing. And, you know, a lot of it has to do, of course, with financial reasons. When we ask properties, you know, what are you focusing your dollars on? So many of you are focusing on your fixed costs just to make sure that you keep your property, you know, going. There are, you know, some that have increased, and I'll show you some of the statistics of what other folks are investing in. But I thought this was an interesting response from one of the innkeepers under the others section who couldn't apply for an SBA loan. And, you know, they're a startup. They just recently opened, and with every, you know, relief program that they've come across, you know, they started planning for this investment a long time ago before COVID, but it really didn't matter because when they don't have the tax record to support any assistance for grants, they're not able to get those. So I thought that was a good call out and something that we could, you know, certainly I would love to hear from the associations, you know, if they've had other properties who've been dealing with this same type of scenario, and if there's any other types of support that are outside of the ones that we've been talking about. I know in the music industry, I've seen a lot of this come up from nonprofits and so many different resources. So I'm just curious if there is potentially a list of other resources that INS could reach out to. So I love it. So yes, Jerry Maguire is not the only one waiting for someone to show him the money. Not only are innkeepers, but travelers. So when we talk about those travelers and we're talking about them booking within that, you know, 30 to 60 day time period and looking for deals, you know, certainly 41% their job has already been affected, but more than half, it hasn't been impacted yet, or they're retired, because we do have that, you know, that demographic that is, you know, the baby boomers that are in retirement. So they are looking for different packages. So when we asked for the properties, you know, have you increased or decreased your marketing? 46% said no change. However, I'm going to show you a couple of things. When we asked if you have increased your marketing, to tell us what you have been investing in. Oops, I want to make sure I go back to full screen there. So here you can see specials and packages, deals and discounts. So this is coming straight from the innkeepers who participated in the survey. And part of that is, you know, there are things that you can invest in marketing that aren't going to cost you, you know, anything directly out of pocket. 15% working more with book direct sites, more rooms on OTAs, but really looking for those opportunities where you can answer to what the traveler is looking for, and then also work on something that isn't going to require any out-of-pocket money right up front. So one of the other things is that breakfast options are equally important. So when we look at the travelers, and I had mentioned that the in-room climate control was important, and this is the second half of that slide. Across the board, breakfast continues to be important, but it's where is it? In-room, to-go breakfast, and how you're serving it, and making sure you're communicating that properly. So getting creative on packages, a couple of things I wanted to share, and we're almost right at time here. So Wicker Park Inn, been in business for 16 years. They responded in the other section that they put together a breakfast in bed package. You would think that this is something that's so obvious, but they said that it's one of their most popular packages right now. And there's a lot of inns who've offered breakfast in bed for a lot of years, but they haven't put it out there because it's something that they didn't, you know, want to have to offer on a daily basis. Devonfield Inn have been in business with their new owners for the last 2.5 years. They are on 32 acres out in Western Mass in the Berkshires, and they have 32 acres, and they said, okay, we've already got this, what can we do with it? So they started a yoga and a concert series on the lawn. And I've seen this concert series and bringing music into properties quite often. And it's really interesting because in a lot of places, you can't have a concert, but you can have a recital as long as it's seated and you're practicing social distancing. And they also took that 32 acres and came up with different hikes that they hadn't had, and they share those out with their travelers. And right here, this is a pop-up on their website, five amazing hikes. Here are the new trails that we have. Click here for more information. Palmer House Inn out in Falmouth, new owners for the last 2.5 years. I love that they do shrink wrapped cookies, because we love our cookies when we stay at properties, and for travelers to feel more safe, they're shrink wrapping them. Doing breakfast on the porches and the desks, tying back to that. We know breakfast is still important, so looking at different ways that we can deliver that. I loved picnic baskets for Martha's Vineyard day trips. I've seen a lot of inns who do amenity baskets on arrival that has everything right there for the guests. They hand it to them when they arrive, and then they've got it, or it's in their room for them. Another innkeeper that shared something that I didn't put in here that I loved was they reached out to, I think it was the top 10% of their return guests. So they went back into their property management software, identified those high value guests, and they sent them, they put together little gift baskets. They went around and got things from their area and sent that out to them and said, you know, we can't wait to see you again soon, and giving them that touch and that feel of being back there. And something that we've seen trending, and we're going to continue to see trending, are elopements, micro weddings, small weddings, putting those packages together. And, you know, I have several, my niece was getting married in October. She went from 200 people down to 50, probably going to go to 25. So small weddings are going to continue to trend. If your property isn't busy right now, what do you attribute that to? Still 60% state guidelines. So there still are quite a few properties that are being restricted by their state. So if you are accepting guests, if you are, you know, able to take guests and you're not part of that group that said that they can't, make sure, again, you're communicating that with them. These are screenshots of a newsletter that I got from one of our members, Aldrich Guest House, that I just loved. I thought they did a fantastic job at communicating. Not only are they open, but reminding them, you know, to keep us in mind, book direct, book with confidence, and here's the reasons why. And this is an example of a property that, and this is from back when this all started, but we're seeing more of this with drive-through weddings and things like that. So, you know, think about continuing to expand our reach, and I'll recap with this because I know I'm just 4 minutes over, but continuing to expand our reach, looking for opportunities. We are going to be hosting Wheel of Fortune. We're going to be hosting a B&B week in October. You can stop by our booth. I'll tell you more about that. We're going to be bringing back awards and sharing that out with all the associations and all of the press, and continuing to draw that interest into why B&Bs are the choice. And to stay informed, it's easy. Go to Google Alerts, set up a Google Alert for B&Bs, and set up where your area is, and Google will send you a daily update of any time that B&Bs are included in the media in that day. We've got B&Bs for vets coming up on November 10th. That's a great PR opportunity, and through ALP, so be looking for that. And just a reminder, you know, that we're stronger together, and working together as associations, continuing to support the Book Direct movement is now more important than ever. If you haven't taken the time to go to the Book Direct education site, take a minute to go there, look at what the newest updates are, sign up for the newsletters so that you can stay engaged. And I put this last slide on here so that you can access it later, because when I asked, you know, what are other things that we could help with, an innkeeper out in West Virginia, you know, was looking for a maintenance and cleaning man. And other feedback was, you know, continue the advice on marketing and advertising across the industry. So it's a call out to everyone, and to continue to spread the words that B&Bs are the safest place to stay, not only during the pandemic, but anyway. And, you know, focus on those goals that you set at conference. For each of these times that you attend a development day or a state conference, you know, making sure that you're honing in on the few things that you want to be able to achieve, just like you would at any other conference, because I know we're all overwhelmed, and doing whatever you can to achieve that. And whatever we can do to help you and anybody else in the industry, please feel free to reach out. And I couldn't be more excited to be able to spend this time here with you this morning. So I think we're exactly 6 minutes late, which I'm known for. So I think we'll need to wrap up, because everybody's going to be going into the trade show and visiting all the vendors. If you haven't gone to Development Day yet, it's awesome. Go head right out to that lobby, click into the trade show, and you can walk right in and visit all the vendors, and they'll be all there to see you and be happy to see you. And share your video if you come to our booth so we get to see you.
Thanks a lot, Janice. As Janice had said, everybody wants to now, for the 2 hours, we're going to be having the virtual marketplace. So feel free, visit all 18 of our exhibitors, move around their booth spaces. And while that's going on, I will look to get Janice and Tim's presentation set up into the e-program. All right. Thanks again, Janice and Tim.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Thanks so much, ALP. Thanks, Innkeepers.
Bye, guys.